So Tom, radio mic for you, probably best on the lapel.
There we go. Testing. Right.
Okay, and hopefully there will be a presentation on here somewhere
start
for
navigating.
you.
Dear.
And as I say, Tom is from the Surrey Space Centre. He's here today to talk to us about VR2Space, virtual reality to space. And I noticed there's some very expensive-looking hardware sitting on the front bench there, which I'm going to enjoy learning about in the next few minutes.
Where are they? Seriously, though, where's the folder where all the presentations are being kept? Slight technical difficulty here. Okay, now I'm really in deep. Okay, you can see it's unfolding before you. So the folder where the presentations are kept. Where is that? I think it was navigated away from. Here we are. Excellent. It's all right. Crisis averted. Okay. Then full screen mode.
Okay, thank you very much, Tom. And if it's okay, we'll allow 5 minutes or so for questions from the audience and the internet at the end of your presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely fine. Well, thank you very much for the introduction. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. I spoke here a number of years ago in the second year of my PhD at the Space Centre, and it was a very friendly audience. You guys are really great, actually, and I was just commenting earlier on that if the world ever does come to an apocalypse, I think you guys are going to be the ones running the New World Order, restoring communications, perhaps. So I'm going to be talking about the Virtual Ride to Space project, VR2Space. This is something that myself and my colleagues are currently running at the Space Centre. Although we've had an awful lot of help, actually, from a number of people that I'll be mentioning along the way. So, a brief outline. I want to talk a bit about why we're doing this, the sort of evolving story of space, and how every man, the guy on the street, how the relationship with space is changing a little bit, and how they're maybe going to be getting more involved if we have our way. Also, the what. So, what is this thing? How are we putting it together? The mission profile as well, the payloads. And some of the really tricky aspects of actually executing this project. So this is the VR2Space team. I can only apologise to a few of you guys who got sort of the bad end of the stick with the photos. There's poor old Charlie there looking very unhappy in one of our vacuum chambers, actually uninstalling one of our thrusters. Alex Erlang, again, sorry. Andrea, myself up there, Tom Harle, Thomas Frame. Savan, and you can just about see Aaron at the back there, whose idea this was in the first place. Maybe we've got a better. There we are. That's a better photo of Aaron. This was the face of VR2Space when the project was first put out there on the internet. This is what we used. I think it really captures the enthusiasm that he has for space, and we've enjoyed parodying him ever since. So there's that. So our day jobs. I mean, I'm not a radio ham myself, although I find this all absolutely fascinating. Between the lot of us, we've got rocket scientists. So I do propulsion stuff. There's a bit of plasma propulsion there for you. We've got robotics guys. We've got guys looking at CubeSat payloads. We've got guys that worked on the Strand CubeSat, which was another very interesting project. And it really is as fun as it looks, and it stimulates a lot of interesting discussion. Over lunches, we talk a lot about where things are going to be going in space and what the future is. And a recurring theme actually was really the fact that as space has evolved, the everyman has not really been able to get there. It's really been a place for, well, dogs, chimps, astronauts. We've maybe got some commercial tourism coming up on the horizon, but we're always trying to work out, how can we get from say, Dragon capsule to something that everyone can access. We're trying to work out, well, you can make a better rocket. Yes, we'll make a very efficient rocket. We'll try to reduce the cost of space, increase ISP, all of this stuff, but it inevitably comes down. It's a very hard problem to solve. As you can see, we haven't solved it yet, although Elon Musk is doing his absolute best, bless him. But I'm going to put in a speculative step that's somewhere between the Dragon capsule and the Starship Enterprise. Maybe we'll have some virtual reality that can send people into space, or maybe not just into space, but into inaccessible regions using clever payloads, cameras, and say virtual reality headsets. So that is the first bit of speculation in what is going to be not all speculation, but a fair amount of it, and it may get worse towards the end. So we decided to put a project together. We started planning it. We set some objectives. We wanted to record a panoramic video, a sphere of imagery of an ascent into space. It later turned out that that'd be quite tricky, so we conceded about 30 kilometers. It's close enough. Certainly looks like space. We're going to record the attitude, the roll rates, so all of the inertial information, so that we can synchronize this with the videos that we're taking and post-process the video footage, so that if you take this sphere of imagery, upload it onto a virtual reality headset, or just put it into your phone, and press the play button, you can look around and witness what's going on around you, as if you're actually ascending in a balloon up to the 30-kilometer-ish altitude. And this obviously is an excellent opportunity to showcase some of the amazing technical skills in Surrey. I've put Surrey University, but actually this has been a collaborative effort with lots of different groups coming together to try and promote science and engineering in the Surrey area, and just to show what is possible if you've got a lot of enthusiasm and you want to do something. It can be done. So, talk a little bit about virtual reality. So, a bit like tablets, they had their first go, and they were a bit rubbish. And now we've got iPads and Microsoft Surfaces, and they're a lot more svelte, and they're actually starting to take off now because people can hold them and actually do something. Virtual reality, it had a go in the 80s, didn't really do so well, but now technology has increased exponentially, as it has a tendency to do, and we have some really incredible hardware that can provide an absolutely seamless virtual reality experience. And we're starting to see the emergence of all sorts of experiences now. So we've got a guy up there controlling drones. That's a pretty interesting one. So you have an eye from the sky, real time. We've got guys playing video games. Some of you guys may recognize H.R. Geiger's Alien here. There's a rather terrifying game coming out based on the Alien 80s film. We've also got this fella here who's pretending to be a bird at the moment. He's on this gimbal system, and he can move around, and he's flapping his arms, and he can see the world around him. It's a simulated bird flight. And this is, I particularly like this one. This is a roller coaster, but a mini roller coaster. I'm not sure if you can see it. It's actually a tiny little roller coaster that's going around someone's front room as if you were a Lego man, and you put your reality headset on, and you can witness it. There's also been gender swaps, so you swap your virtual reality headsets and you sort of see what the other gender is seeing. A rather bizarre one. Wasn't going to put any photos up of that, maybe not quite safe for work. But we want to add virtual ride-to-space to this list of experiences. So we started a Kickstarter campaign. So it's a little bit like eBay. It's almost like a bid system. You put up an idea and you give a bunch of say, things that you'll give in return for a certain amount of money. We put this on the internet. We had a really great reception. The internet media, as well as good old-fashioned Surrey Advertiser, picked it up, and there was a lot of enthusiasm about it, which we were really encouraged by. So this is a selection of bits from the internet. VR2Space loved this project. We also, so apart from just the enthusiasm, we had a lot of very useful input. So people out there were really interested in how we're going to execute this, and they wanted to know, well, how are we going to deal with this? How are we going to deal with the spin rates? How are we going to actually synchronize the footage? And I'm fairly sure there were 14-year-olds out there with much more time on their hands than I have, who can program better than I can, and giving us a lot of good feedback on how we could stitch this together. And we took all of these suggestions and we rolled it back into the project. And we got some responses here from Aaron talking about a great suggestion of actually giving away some of the GoPros at the end of it, for a couple of £100 or so. So we took all this feedback. Unfortunately, actually, the first time around it failed. So we'd never done a Kickstarter before. We'd seen a lot of them. But it turns out that you've got to get it just right in terms of the price that you're pitching the project at, the amount that you've already demonstrated, and how much you're asking for as well, and what kind of rewards you're getting. So a lot of the feedback we got pointed us towards a better way of doing this. So we teamed up with Ears, who they'll be talking a bit later on. I'm going to be glossing over a lot of what the Ears guys did, because actually they're going to be talking about it later on today, and they've done a really fantastic job. It was really quite successful. So I won't steal your thunder. So we did an Ears launch to try and validate some of our ideas. Also, we had a corporate sponsor who became suddenly very interested in what we were doing. I'll be evasive at the moment and then reveal it at the end as a grand reveal. They gave us an awful lot of money to actually build the hardware and show the people of the internet that this is something that we can do and we are going to do, regardless of whether you give us your money or not. Now we're just asking, hey, you pay £6, we'll give you the software, rather than give us £50 and we might be able to buy the cameras. So we went through. We figured out what kind of budget we needed and how we were going to put it all together. We can see we've got the electronics, the actual main structure, the flight support, and it all came in around sort of £4,000 or £5,000 plus or minus. So this was something that we could do on a fairly reasonable budget, actually. And certainly with the money from corporate sponsors and the Kickstarter money, we figured that we should be able to do this. So we relaunched. Bigger and better, well actually bigger but with smaller amounts of money that we're asking for. And I think this is fairly interesting. So this is a little plot you get at the end of it. True to form, plot's always a good thing. So this is the amount of money that was pledged over time. So at the very beginning it started rising very slowly and then plateaued. And we thought, oh no, it's doomed. That's it, we're not going to do it, VR2Space is dead. But in the final hours, we actually managed to pull it out of the bag. I'm not entirely sure what happened. We tried to correlate this with tweets or Facebook shares or some sort of metric. We couldn't figure it out. I think essentially we got to about £3,000 and people realized, actually, if we just put a little bit more in, we can do this. And in terms of the amounts we're asking for, so I put up here the lowest amount, the highest amount, and also the most popular amount as well. So it's fairly interesting. For £1, you get some JPEGs from space, just some images that we put in a little pack and send off to you. For £1, it's rude not to. So for £210, we had 3 backers, a GoPro from space. This is something we added quite late on, so we didn't quite fill all the slots. We've got a few left, if you're interested. Just goes to show that people want stuff that's been in space. I believe actually Stevie the Stag sold for a fairly sizable amount. I'm sure the Years guys will tell you about that later on. But the most popular amount was £6. This is maybe like the number 42. I don't think it has any mystery attached to it, but it seems to be the golden spot. I mean, people buying, say, a video game on the internet, £6 is not an awful lot of money, but it's certainly enough to buy an Oculus Rift experience. So if you have the headset and you're looking for a way to rationalize your purchase, then this is maybe a good way to do it. And £6 seems to be quite popular. So you get the full software. You can speed up, slow down, reverse time. You can imagine if you're going up in the first instance, if you speed up and then play it backwards, you're then skydiving. Some people will find that interesting. Some people will just be terrified. But we're quite happy that this actually succeeded. So we'd actually cracked on with the payload design, a fair while before the second Kickstarter started. This is the basic idea. So we have our main structure. We have cameras positioned along the top, middle, and bottom of the main structure. We have a number of electronics units, IMUs, gyro sensors, magnetometers. We've got a GPS receiver in there, with battery packs, weather balloon to take the thing up, and our recovery parachute. And I'm quite, okay, and in terms of the mission profile, this is what we're going for. This is actually a still that I took from our Kickstarter campaign. Again, true to form, Aaron the engineer, as part of the video, stated, well, I think the best way to understand this is with a graph, people of internet. So here's the graph that he put, and actually it's rather good. So height versus time, you send the payload up using our balloon. You get up to some height, at which point the balloon bursts. Then it will drop rather suddenly, and at some point the parachute will deploy, and there will be a rather leisurely descent down to Earth, and eventually you'll end up on the ground where we are happy because we've recovered the payload and it hasn't landed in a lake or a cowpat or someone's roof. So a brief word on the electronics. Again, I'm not going to be going into this in massive detail because the EARS guys, this is their payload essentially. They did a lot of work on this. Just to give you an idea, we've got said IMUs, we've got microcontrollers, receivers, antennas on the ground to actually pick this thing up. So once the balloon has gone up into space and it's while it's going up there, we need to make sure we can track it, make sure we know where it is. When it bursts, we need to make sure we know where it is as it's coming down. I believe it could be anything up to 100 kilometers, possibly even more, depending on the prevailing winds. And the aforementioned FunCube dongle, this will be used to track the payload along with the GPS, using many different cars with roof-mounted ultra-high-frequency antennas. So the GoPro camera. This is an absolutely incredible piece of kit. I'm sure you all know, you all recognise this. If not, you'll be forgiven. It's been used extensively within the extreme sports community, who love bolting it onto their helmets, onto their cars, onto their wheels, absolutely everything. They're very robust. We're going to be going for the 720p option. This is really just a trade-off between how much data we can store on board, because we're going to be storing this video footage on board during the flight. And it means that we get a compromise between storage and, say, field of view as well. And 720p is a fairly good resolution, especially if you're looking in the far field. So this is the assembled payload. I'm just going to walk over here and bring it over just so I can gesticulate a bit easier. So I suppose this is the grand reveal. I'm sorry I don't have a silk cloth I can suddenly whip away. As you can see, we've got the 3 GoPros at the top. We've got a few down in the middle here. And again, symmetrically, we have some around the bottom. This is a styrofoam chassis within which we have the electronics. So we've got all the inertial measurement stuff, all of the GPS transmitters, receivers. We'll have some high-frequency transmitters as well, so we can track where this is going. The balloon's going to be attached to tethers along the top here. This whole thing is weighing in around 2 kilograms at the moment, maybe a little bit more, maybe a hair over that. It's very simple, very robust. If it falls to Earth, hopefully we'll be able to just replace certain aspects of it. I think the cameras will be okay, actually. These brackets here, we can just 3D print some more of those. In fact, we use some 3D printing to get this structure in place. So people of the internet, here it is. You paid for it, more or less. And we're looking to launch somewhere within the next couple of weeks, actually. So that is the assembled payload. And there it is, looking rather monolithic. We've got a few other shots of it here, some glamour shots. And there's the electronics inside the main chassis. So here's some of the more tricky aspects of this mission. I wanted to put this out here because it is rather interesting. So we've got these cameras, and there are a number of technically rather challenging aspects to it. So we need to work out the intrinsic, so the properties of the camera, and the extrinsic properties, which are how the cameras relate in position to each other. So some of the things we need to find out. We need to find the position of the image center. We need to find the focal length. We need to find the different scaling factors for row pixels and column pixels. We need to figure out rotational and translational matrices to understand how the positions of these cameras relate to each other. Lens distortion effects. Obviously, these lenses are not quite fisheye, but they're not flat, that's for sure. So a number of things that we need to empirically find out before we can actually go ahead with this. We're doing time, by the way. Okay, I think we're doing okay. Maybe a bit off. There we are. Okay, jolly good. Okay. So I'm not going to go massively into detail, but there are going to be a few occasions I won't go through. So single camera calibration. You can imagine you've got your lens. It's not going to be completely undistorted. We first need to find out the different parameters of this matrix equation here, which are going to describe the geometry of the lens itself. There are a number of ways you can do this. Actually, one of the guys that are on our team, fortunately, he's been pioneering some very advanced techniques for doing this. He's our robotics expert. You can just look it up. You can just look up the field of view, etc. However, we found that from our experiments, it didn't quite match up all the time, and it might only be out by a few degrees. However, for some of our cameras, you may notice that they're spaced out 120 degrees from each other, and some of them only have a field of view of 60 degrees. So the overlap is rather small in some aspects. So this is quite a challenge, and we need to make sure that we really understand the properties of the camera before we launch this mission. So as part of the single camera calibration, we have some software. We take some images, and we use the ubiquitous checkerboard pattern, and we move around. We try to get an idea of what the positional spatial relationship is between one point on the lens and other points on the lens. You can see here we've got the error between one point and another point, and we can use this information to characterize the lens itself in the CCD. We've got our guy Savan here walking around. The software is picking up the checkerboard pattern, and it uses that to actually characterize the lens. So we got all the parameters out from this technique that we were using, and we used it to calculate the focal length, the number of pixels, and we actually managed to get fairly close to what the manufacturer specification said for this particular mode of operation. So depending on whether you use 1080p, 720p, etc., you're going to get a different field of view. And it's encouraging that actually our values of, say, 90 degrees and 58 degrees married up reasonably well with the sort of 94 and 55 that the manufacturer was quoting. So that's encouraging. Of course, we have more than one camera. And when you have them arranged in this sort of fixed geometry like this, there are much more advanced techniques that you can use to try and work out the intrinsic and the extrinsic characteristics of the camera in one shot, so multi-camera calibration. This is a very advanced technique. This was only published last year, in fact, and it involves using a multi-scale image, so a sort of fractal-like image that has features across many different scales, sort of Brownian noise, I suppose. And you essentially walk around with this board, and each camera, if you've got two cameras that can pick up the same feature, they can use that information with a whole lot of maths to figure out the intrinsic and the extrinsic properties of the camera. So the important part is you need to make sure that two cameras at a time can see the same features in the image. That's what this is all based around, actual recognition of unique features within this map. So this basically removes the need to laboriously go through each camera and figure out the properties of each. You can just do it in one shot. So here we are. It's just explaining it a bit more. So we have the cameras, and we take the pattern. We walk around the system, and we end up building up some statistics. And this is a toolbox that's available online for free, which is fantastic. These guys that are doing all this work, putting their lives into PhDs and etc., they're just putting it out there for people to use. So this is particularly important, in fact, because, as I said earlier on, some of the spacings of these cameras, we're only going to have a few degrees overlap. So we need to really make sure that that we calibrate these cameras as well as we can. So after all of that, the video pipeline. So we've characterized our cameras, and we understand the relationship between them all, and then we send it up. We record our footage, so we need to synchronize the onboard electronics with the video recording. There are many different ways we can do this. So we acquire the video, we then stitch it together. This is a very tricky problem, actually, that we're enlisting the help of not just our corporate sponsor, but guys within the Space Center, and any super geeks out there that know how to do this. We have some commercial tools. We've got some free tools that are just available on the internet that will allow us to do this as well. So hopefully in the end, we'll be able to stitch this image set together and get our sphere of video that we can upload to the Oculus Rift or to our mobile phones, so you can see it just like sort of estate agent's tablet when they give it to you looking around the house. And there'll be a certain amount of post-processing as well. So you can imagine as we're going up, the sun may glare into one of the lenses, and this may cause some lens flare. It may overexpose the CCDs. So there is going to be a degree of video processing. We may need to stitch the odd seam here and there if we don't quite get it right. Maybe edit out the UFOs for the secret agencies. So what's next? This is the wild speculation I was talking about earlier on. There really is no limit, actually, to where we could take this once we have a payload that we know works. So if we get the right balance of buoyancy and mass, we may be able to float this down Death Valley, for example. What's next? We could maybe float it down a rather beautiful snowy valley. I know I'd like to experience that. What's next? Perhaps a guided tour of the International Space Station. We have little cubes up there at the moment, little spheres rather, that float around under their own power and control. Why not put some more cameras on them and maybe have a guided tour of the space station? What's next? So we could even go to actual orbit. This is not beyond the realms of believability. We put cameras in space all the time. It'll be a bit of a task, but we could do it. And you might be able to sustain a number of orbits, in fact, before you come crashing back down to Earth. So that's everything. Thank you very much for your attention. It's an absolute pleasure to be here and talk to you about this. I want to nod to our corporate sponsor, who's now revealed, also to EARS and the UK High Altitude Society, a number of guys who were very generous to sponsor us during the Kickstarter campaign. You were very helpful. You helped make this a reality. Thank you for your attention. Any questions?
Okay, I think we'll just say thank you very much to Tom for that very interesting presentation in the usual way. And I think we've got just a couple of moments. If anyone has any questions in the room, be happy to come over with a microphone. Is it only me who's thinking, are those GoPros going to work at that altitude?
How are you going to recover the equipment when it comes down in the North Sea?
With a boat. No, if it does go into the North Sea, then we'll just have to make a call. If it's safe and reasonably practicable, then maybe we'll give it a go and try and recover it. But obviously, we need to make sure that no one gets hurt during this. So if we can recover it, we will. If it looks like it's going to maybe cause risk of injury, then we won't, unfortunately. But we'll do our absolute best to launch in the middle of England. Try and make sure that doesn't happen. It's a risk. You're right.
Okay, one more question over here from Akeem.
Taking up the concerns of David about the GoPros, question, powering them.
Powering them. So we're going to be using the onboard power. Right? So we've got batteries actually within the GoPros themselves. We're hoping this will be enough to capture the footage on the way up, at least. On the way down, probably not. They're probably going to run out. Batteries do work a bit better when they're colder. So with a bit of luck, we'll be able to get enough footage, I think, on the GoPro power alone.
Okay, one more, just down here.
Thank you very much. I just wondered why you're not using APRS, because then your public can follow you on the internet, the mission. And secondly, of course, that you have the option of deciding, well, it's going in the wrong direction, I need to bring it down before it gets to this North Sea.
Yes, actually, I'm not sure if it's APRS we're using. Maybe the EARS guys can help me out with this. But I believe, yes, spacenearest.us. So guys can log on to this, and they should be able to track the progress of the mission. So yeah, if we see it's going in the wrong direction, well, maybe there's not an awful lot we can do about it, but at least we can maybe prepare ourselves emotionally for the loss of our payload.
Hans, there's a legal licensing restriction on APRS from balloons in the UK, so that's probably why we're not using that. We've got one question from the internet. Alan says, why didn't he use one camera with 3-axis gimbal? It would be cheaper and lighter.
I'm sorry, what was the name of that fella again? Alan. Ah, I thought it was Aaron. I thought he was trolling me there. Okay. Why didn't we use one camera with 3-axis control rather than using a whole bunch of cameras? Okay, well, we did actually briefly toy with the idea of having single cameras spinning and trying to synchronize frame rates with the spinning of the camera to try and capture panoramics. So you're sort of taking one shot, and there'll be maybe like a 1-second delay or something. So you couldn't look over here, but suddenly look over here and expect to see, a consistent image. So if you were smoothly looking around, you might be able to get away with it. Actually, this was the most robust way that we figured out we could do it. Of course, there are other ways of doing it. You can do it with more cameras. You may be able to do it with less. So it's perfectly valid. This is the way that we chose.
Okay, well, I think that's it for the questions for the moment. And Tom, thank you very much indeed, and good luck. I certainly look forward to seeing that once you've returned the video to the sponsors and released it for the rest of us people who are too mean to contribute to see later. Thank you.
Thank you very much.